My name is Alice N. Gilbert, and the original story never gives my exact age, but I still remember the Tuesday night when my relationship quietly began to die. The apartment smelled like garlic, rosemary chicken, and the expensive Pinot Noir Caleb had been talking about for weeks. Tuesday was our unofficial date night. Nothing fancy. No reservations. Just dinner, wine, and the comfortable ritual of building a life together, one ordinary evening at a time. I had left work early to cook his favorite meal. I set the table and even lit the ridiculous decorative candle Caleb had bought from an overpriced home store. At 7:15, his key turned in the lock. Caleb came inside carrying damp air and expensive cologne with him. "Something smells amazing." He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind and rested his chin against my shoulder. For a moment, everything felt exactly right. We ate. He told me about office drama, complained about a client, made me laugh. Then halfway through dinner, he smiled strangely. "So, you'll never guess who messaged me today." "Who?" "Jessica." My fork stopped. Jessica. His ex-girlfriend. The woman from old stories Caleb always finished with, "God, that relationship was a disaster." "Your ex Jessica?" "She's in town for a conference." He took another sip of wine. "She asked if I wanted to grab drinks tomorrow." I waited. "Just you two?" Caleb's expression changed immediately. The warmth disappeared. "Oh, don't start. I'm asking a question." "It's drinks, Alice. Don't be insecure." There it was. Insecure. The word he used whenever my boundary inconvenienced him. "It isn't about insecurity." "Then what?" "Respect." I gestured between us. "For you. For me. For this relationship." Caleb rolled his eyes and pushed back from the table. "I'm going. It isn't a debate. Caleb, I can have female friends. I'm not going to be controlled." Then he walked out of the kitchen carrying his wine. The following evening, he dressed more carefully than usual. Different shirt. Watch. The cologne he normally saved for special occasions. "You're really not going to say anything?" he asked. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Have fun. Be safe." Something a normal girlfriend would say. I looked at him. "Be safe." He left annoyed. 2 hours later, I was sitting alone watching a movie I wasn't actually following when my phone lit up. Mark, a mutual friend. "Hey, Alice, I'm at the Baxter. Caleb's here with some woman." I already knew. "Jessica?" "Yeah." Then came another message. "Does just drinks usually involve him sitting on his ex-girlfriend's lap?" My blood went cold. Before I could reply, Mark sent a photograph. I opened it. Caleb was sitting sideways across Jessica's lap inside a dark cocktail lounge. Her arm was around his waist. One hand rested possessively against his hip. But that wasn't what hurt most. Caleb was laughing, head tilted back, eyes closed, completely unguarded. It was the laugh he used to give me. The laugh I hadn't realized had disappeared from our relationship until I saw him giving it to someone else. Suddenly, "Don't be insecure" sounded different. It wasn't reassurance. It was preparation. He had made me question my instincts so he could cross the boundary without feeling guilty. I turned off the television. Then I stood. No screaming. No furious phone call. No demand for an explanation. I pulled a suitcase from the closet. Laptop. Documents. Clothes. My grandmother's jewelry. My favorite books. Everything that was mine went into bags. Everything connected to him stayed. In the kitchen, I placed his spare key on the counter. Then I tore a sheet from our grocery list pad and wrote 2 words. "You're right." Not because he was right about me being insecure. Because he was right that I shouldn't stay somewhere that made me feel that way. My phone began vibrating. Caleb. I silenced it. Then again. And again. I wheeled my suitcase toward the door. The key clicked softly against the granite behind me. I walked out without confronting him. By the time I reached Mark's apartment, Caleb had called 19 times. I never answered once. Mark opened the door before I even knocked. One look at the suitcase beside me and the expression on my face was enough. "Come in." That was all he said. No questions. No pity. Just space. I slept on his couch that night. Or tried to. The first shock had worn off, leaving behind something heavier. Loss. Not just Caleb. The apartment. Our Tuesday dinners. The future I had assumed was already quietly waiting for us. I stared at the ceiling and let the pain exist. I refused to text him. That mattered. The next morning, I went running until my lungs burned. When I returned, my phone was covered in notifications. Caleb's messages had begun exactly the way I expected. What the hell? Where are you? Then, are you seriously this angry? Then, this is childish. Call me. A few hours later, the tone changed. Okay. It looked bad. Jessica was leaving town. It meant nothing. Come home so we can talk. Then came the version where somehow I became the problem. I cannot believe you abandoned us over one stupid night. You're overreacting. This is cruel. I stared at that message. Abandoned us. Caleb had spent an evening sitting on his ex-girlfriend's lap after telling me my concerns were insecurity. But I was cruel because I left. I didn't answer. My silence became the only response he couldn't manipulate. A few days later, I found a furnished month-to-month apartment. It was beige, sterile, tiny kitchen, cheap furniture. I loved it. It belonged to no shared memory. I went to work. I ran. I read books I had abandoned because Caleb always wanted us watching whatever show he liked. I reconnected with old friends. Slowly, I realized how small my life had become inside that relationship. Caleb kept trying. Day 5. Are you even getting these? I'm worried. Day 8. I went to your office. They said you were there. So you're just ignoring me now? Then anger. Fine. Be a child. Day 12. The lease ends in 2 months. We have practical things to discuss. You can't run away from adult responsibilities. That one almost impressed me. He had gone from betrayal to concern, to insults, to administrative pressure, without ever saying the one sentence that mattered. I was wrong. Weeks passed. The messages slowed. My apartment stopped feeling temporary. I bought a plant, hung pictures, started making coffee in the mornings without automatically reaching for a second mug. The pain became background noise. Then, almost a month after I left, Caleb stopped contacting me completely. For 7 days, nothing. I thought he had finally accepted it. Then my phone buzzed at the gym. Caleb. I ignored the first call, then another, then a third. After my shower, I saw a voicemail. Something about it felt different. I stood outside beneath the cold evening air and pressed play. Caleb's voice sounded broken. Not angry, not defensive, just wrecked. Alice. Jessica wasn't who I thought she was. I said nothing, obviously. He kept talking. She used me. A wet breath. She went back to her ex-girlfriend in Seattle. That detail made everything strangely clear. Jessica hadn't chosen Caleb. She had used him for attention while she was in town. Now she was gone. And suddenly, Caleb remembered the woman whose key was sitting on the counter. I see it now, he said. I threw away everything we had. Then came the sentence that told me he still didn't understand. Please call me. I need you. Need. Not love. Not respect. Not I'm sorry for what I did to you. He needed me because Jessica had disappeared. He needed comfort, stability, someone to absorb the consequences. I deleted the voicemail. Then I blocked his number. For the first time. Completely. 3 days later, a message arrived from a new number. I know you blocked me. I deserve it. But Jessica manipulated me. That wasn't the real me. I read the entire wall of text. According to Caleb, the real him was the man who cooked with me, watched movies beside me, and talked about our future. The man who lied. The man who called me insecure. The man who sat on Jessica's lap. Apparently that version didn't count. He ended with, "1 coffee. Please." I just need to see you. I blocked the number. No reply. No explanation. By then, I understood something important. Caleb wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for access. And access was the one thing I would never give him again. 3 months after I walked out, Mark invited me to his birthday gathering. I almost skipped it. Instead, I went. I had no idea Caleb was going to be there. And when he walked through the pub door looking like a ghost of the man I remembered, I realized my silence had finally brought him face to face with the one thing he had spent months avoiding: consequences. Exactly 3 months after I walked out, Mark held his birthday gathering at a small neighborhood pub. Nothing fancy. Wooden tables, local beer, music loud enough to keep conversations private without making everyone shout. Mark had practically ordered me to come. "You can't turn into a hermit, Alice." "I'm not a hermit. You own 3 houseplants now. That proves responsibility. It proves intervention is necessary." So I went. I wore a simple black blouse, jeans, and boots I had bought after moving into my new apartment. Nothing meant to impress anyone. I simply felt good. That was still surprising sometimes. For weeks after leaving Caleb, every good moment had come with guilt attached. A peaceful morning would make me wonder whether he was miserable. A night out with friends would make me remember what we used to do together. Now, happiness was starting to exist without requiring permission from the past. I was standing beside Mark's girlfriend, laughing about a disastrous hiking trip they had taken, when something in the room shifted. It's strange how your body recognizes someone before your mind does. My shoulders tightened. I turned. Caleb was standing 5 feet away. He looked different, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His hair was longer and badly maintained, and the confident posture I remembered had disappeared. He looked like someone who had spent months waiting for life to return to normal and had finally realized it wasn't going to. Mark glanced at me immediately. His expression said everything. I didn't invite him. I gave him a tiny nod. "I'm fine." Caleb stepped closer. "Hey." "Hi, Caleb." My voice surprised even me. Neutral. Not cold. Not angry. Just neutral. "Can we talk?" "About what?" His eyes flicked toward everyone standing nearby. "Maybe outside?" I shook my head. "I'm here for Mark's birthday. If there's something you need to say, you can say it here." The color rose slightly in his face. That wasn't how he imagined this conversation. He probably expected privacy. Tears. An emotional confrontation. Something intimate enough to make our old relationship feel alive again. Instead, we were standing beside a high-top table while half a dozen people quietly pretended not to listen. Caleb swallowed. "I know I messed up." I waited. "What I said about you being insecure." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was wrong." "Yes." The single word seemed to throw him. "I was scared," he continued. "Confused. Jessica showing up brought back things I thought I wanted. You chose to explore them." "I know." His eyes began watering. "And she used me." I said nothing. "She went back to her ex. She barely even cared what happened to me." "I heard." Caleb stared at me. "You heard?" "Mutual friends talk." He looked embarrassed. "My life's a mess, Alice." I took a sip of my drink. "I'm sorry to hear that. I lost the apartment. I've been staying with my brother. Work's been terrible." He glanced down. "I barely sleep." For a moment, the old instinct stirred. Help him. Comfort him. Tell him everything will be okay. That instinct had controlled me for years. Now I simply let it pass. Caleb looked up again. "I see what I lost." There it was. Not what I did. What I lost. "You were good to me," he continued. "You cared about me. You built a home with me, and I treated it like it was boring." His voice cracked. "I thought Jessica represented something exciting. I thought you were holding me back. And now? Now I know you were the best thing in my life." I felt nothing. That realization was almost unsettling. 3 months earlier, I would have given anything to hear those words. Now they landed like lines from a movie I had already stopped watching. "I'm sorry," Caleb whispered. "Okay." His eyes widened. "That's it?" I understood then. He didn't just want to apologize. He wanted absolution. He needed me to tell him his mistake hadn't permanently changed anything. He needed the old Alice to return and make his guilt easier to carry. "It's okay," I said. Hope flashed across his face. "Really?" "Yes." I held his gaze. "It just doesn't matter anymore." The hope vanished. He looked genuinely stunned. "What?" "I'm not angry at you, Alice. I don't hate you." His face softened slightly. "But I also don't want you back." His expression collapsed again. "You don't feel anything?" "I hope you figure your life out." "That's not what I asked." "I know." Silence stretched between us. Caleb looked around at my friends, at the drink in my hand, at the version of me standing comfortably in a room without needing his approval. "You seem different." "I am." "Because of me?" I shook my head. "No. In spite of you." That hurt him. I could see it. But I wasn't trying to hurt him. That was the difference. I glanced toward Mark. "So anyway," I said, turning back to the group. "You were telling me about almost falling off that trail." Conversation restarted awkwardly, then naturally. Someone laughed. Another person interrupted with a better story. Life moved forward. Behind me, Caleb remained standing there for several seconds. Then I heard the pub door open. And close. I didn't turn around. That was when I knew it was truly over. Not because Caleb had finally apologized. Not because Jessica had abandoned him. Not because karma had balanced some invisible scale. It was over because the man whose opinion once controlled my entire emotional world had walked out of the room. And I didn't even feel the need to watch him leave. After Caleb left the pub, I expected some delayed emotional reaction. Nothing came. No shaking hands. No urge to chase him outside. No sudden sadness because he finally understood what he had thrown away. I just stood there with Mark and the others, listening to the hiking story continue. A few minutes later, I laughed. Not nervously. Not because I was trying to prove I was okay. I laughed because something was genuinely funny. That was the moment I understood how completely my life had changed. 3 months earlier, Caleb's moods controlled the atmosphere of every room I entered. If he was irritated, I became careful. If he was distant, I searched myself for something I had done wrong. If he called me insecure, I immediately questioned whether my boundaries were unreasonable. I had become so used to defending my feelings that I forgot feelings were allowed to exist without permission. The photograph Mark sent me changed that. Not because seeing Caleb on Jessica's lap suddenly destroyed a perfect relationship. The relationship had already been deteriorating. The picture simply removed my ability to keep lying to myself about it. For months, Caleb had told me the discomfort in my stomach was insecurity. It wasn't. It was information. I was watching someone slowly withdraw from our relationship while demanding that I pretend not to notice. When I questioned him, he labeled me controlling. When I asked for respect, he called it jealousy. Then he crossed exactly the boundary he had spent days telling me was imaginary. Leaving without confrontation had been the first decision I made entirely for myself in a long time. People sometimes think silence means weakness. Mine wasn't. It was the first boundary Caleb couldn't negotiate. He couldn't roll his eyes at it. Couldn't twist my words. Couldn't turn an argument around until I apologized for being hurt. There were simply no words available for him to reshape. The weeks after I left taught me something else. I had given up more of myself than I realized. Friends I barely called anymore. Books I stopped reading. Runs I kept postponing. Even stupid little preferences, like what music played while I cooked, had slowly become whatever kept the apartment peaceful. So I took those things back. One ordinary piece at a time. I started running longer routes. I bought books because I wanted them, not because Caleb would read them too. I learned how peaceful a Saturday morning could feel when nobody was testing whether I was interesting enough. Mark and I became closer again. Other friendships returned too. Not dramatically, just messages, coffee, dinner. People asking where I had disappeared to, and me finally admitting that somewhere along the way, I had disappeared inside the relationship before I ever physically left it. Caleb never contacted me after Mark's birthday. Maybe he finally understood. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he eventually found someone else to tell the story to. I don't know. And that's the point. I stopped knowing what Caleb was doing because I stopped needing to know. Jessica eventually became just another name connected to a bad memory. I never contacted her. I never blamed her for everything either. She owed me nothing compared to what Caleb did. He was the person who made commitments to me. He was the person who called me insecure before sitting on his ex-girlfriend's lap. His choices were his, and my choice was leaving. Months later, I still had the photograph Mark sent me buried somewhere in an old message thread. I never deleted it. Not because I wanted to look at it. I didn't. I kept it because that photograph stopped being evidence of betrayal and became evidence of clarity. There was Alice before that picture. The woman carefully constructing dinners and sentences, trying not to seem jealous, difficult, controlling, needy. And there was Alice afterward, the woman who packed her bags, left the key, wrote 2 words. You were right. Caleb had been right about one thing. I shouldn't have stayed in a relationship where I constantly felt insecure. He just misunderstood why I felt that way. I wasn't inherently insecure. I was living beside someone who kept giving me reasons not to feel secure. Once he was gone, the feeling went with him. That realization changed everything. The quiet in my apartment no longer feels empty. It feels like ownership. My phone can sit untouched for hours without me wondering who Caleb is texting. Tuesday nights are still mine. Sometimes I cook rosemary chicken. Sometimes I order takeout. Sometimes I don't speak to anyone until morning. And nobody gets to call that boring. I used to think closure would require Caleb to understand exactly what he did to me. It didn't. Closure happened when his understanding stopped mattering. The last time I saw him, he walked out of that pub alone. I never turned around. And somewhere between the door opening and closing behind him, the final thread connecting me to that old life disappeared. Not with rage. Not with revenge. Just quietly. The same way I had left his key on the counter 3 months earlier. The silence was finally mine. And so was everything that came after it.